Foreign has been my most steady counselor for most of my life. I found her about 30 years ago, back in college, and ever since then, I've leaned on her work. You know that feeling when you come across someone who's just honest and deeply inspiring. Someone whose words give you comfort and strength. That's what she is to me. I love everything she's ever done, except one quote. Just one. And that quote, it's bothered me for decades. It's the one where she says, "You are free when you belong nowhere." That one stopped me in my tracks, and not in a good way. As a social scientist, I know deep down that belonging is not optional. If there's one thing I know for sure, after gathering over 200,000 pieces of data, it's this: when love and belonging are missing, there is always suffering. Always. So how could she say that? But I stayed with the discomfort. I kept thinking about it, trying to understand. And then I found the rest of the quote. It was part of an interview she did with Bill Moyers. He asked her, "So are you saying you belong nowhere?" "To no one." And she said, "I belong to Maya." And suddenly it all made sense. Belonging, I realized, isn't about finding a group to fit into. It's not about changing yourself so you can be accepted. True belonging is a spiritual practice. It's about finding the sacredness in both being part of something and having the courage to stand alone. That courage to stand on your own when your beliefs, your values, your heart don't align with the group. That's the real test. That's true belonging. And yes, it's hard, especially when it feels like standing alone might mean losing your place in something you care about. But to say, "I am part of something greater, and I'll still stand alone if I must," that's freedom. In my work with leaders, I talk a lot about values, my personal values, faith, and courage. And I've heard it all: don't talk about faith. This is a corporate space. It's inappropriate. And maybe for some people that's true. But for me, after sitting across from thousands of people, hearing their stories, their hardest moments, I can tell you this: in those moments, the two things that always show up are cussing and praying. So if you don't want me to cuss or pray, that's okay. Just maybe invite someone else. Because I'm not going to show up and pretend. I'm not going to perform a polished version of myself. That's not real. When I speak, I talk to people about things they've never thought about. Things they might be afraid to say out loud. So they need to see me show up as a real person, not some version in a blazer trying to impress them. There's a passage in Braving the Wilderness that changed me. It says, "Don't walk through the world looking for evidence that you don't belong. You'll always find it. Don't look for evidence that you're not enough. You'll always find that too." Our worth and our belonging are not up for negotiation. They live in our hearts. So I know who I am. I'm clear about that, and I won't negotiate that with anyone. I'll negotiate a deadline, a contract, a schedule, but I won't negotiate who I am. Because when I do that, when I twist myself to fit into your mold, I might succeed in fitting in, but I lose myself in the process. I stop belonging to me. And that is a betrayal I'm not willing to make anymore. I've done that. I'm done with it. Now, let's talk about trust. In the work I do with organizations, and I mean big ones, working directly with executive teams, the thing that comes up the most is trust. How do we build trust in our teams? How do we create a culture of trust? Here's the problem. If your boss sits you down and says, "There are trust issues," your brain goes into panic mode. Why? Because trust is tied to our integrity. It's who we are. The moment someone says, "Trust issues," you stop hearing anything else. You feel attacked. So I started digging into the data, trying to answer this question: what is trust? What are we actually talking about? Turns out trust is made up of 7 specific behaviors. We call it biravng. B is for boundaries. You set them clearly and you respect them. R is for reliability. You do what you say and you follow through. No overcommitting, no people pleasing that ends in disappointment. A is accountability. You own your mistakes. No blame games. You face the hard conversations. V is the vault, confidentiality. Not just about keeping secrets, but also about not sharing what isn't yours to share. Think about that. When someone tells you gossip to feel close to you, it actually makes you trust them less. I is for integrity. Choosing what's right over what's easy. Living your values, even when it's uncomfortable. And trust me, it's always uncomfortable. N is non-judgment. You can ask for help without being shamed. and others can do the same with you. G is for generosity. You assume the best. When something goes wrong, you pause and say, "Help me understand," instead of jumping straight to blame. These are the pieces that build trust. They're observable, they're measurable, they're powerful, and they matter most when you're out there, when you're in the wilderness, when you've stepped outside your echo chamber, when you've chosen truth over comfort. Revenge is what gets you through those moments. So I want to leave you with this. There will be times when standing alone feels too hard, too risky, too painful, and people around you, sometimes even the ones you love, will say, "Don't do it. You're not strong enough. You won't make it." But that's when you reach deep into your wild heart, take a breath, and remind yourself, "I am the wilderness." True belonging is not about finding a group to accept you, and it's certainly not about changing who you are to feel safe in a room. It's something much deeper, more internal, and more courageous. It's a spiritual practice and understanding that changes everything. Most people think belonging means having a crew, being part of something, a family, a culture, a workplace, a community. And while there's nothing wrong with being part of a group, that's not where true belonging starts. It doesn't begin with other people. It begins with yourself. It begins the moment you stop negotiating your values or shrinking yourself for approval. Belonging, at its core, is about showing up fully in your truth, even if that truth separates you from the crowd. It's a paradox because most of us have been raised to believe that in order to belong, we need to blend in, align, go along, make ourselves likable or palatable. We think that if we just say the right things, dress the right way, support the popular opinion, we'll be welcomed, we'll be safe. But what we're doing in those moments isn't belonging, it's fitting in. And fitting in is the opposite of belonging. Fitting in is shape shifting. It's denying parts of yourself to gain approval. It's making trade-offs with your integrity just to avoid rejection. And every time we do that, we send a message to ourselves that who we really are isn't enough. That message sinks deep. It feeds insecurity, shame, and disconnection. True belonging doesn't require external validation. It's not earned by agreement or conformity. It's something internal and personal. It comes from knowing who you are and being willing to stand in that truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because discomfort is part of the deal. There will be times when standing in your truth means standing alone. And when you're alone, you will question whether you've made the right choice. You'll wonder if maybe you should have kept quiet or pretended to agree. That fear is normal. It's the cost of authenticity. And it's also the place where true belonging begins. There's a powerful quote that says, "You are free when you belong nowhere." On the surface, it sounds isolating. It sounds like giving up on connection, but it's not about disconnecting from others. It's about not depending on external approval to define your place in the world. When you stop chasing belonging through acceptance and instead claim it through truth, you realize that you can belong anywhere because you are grounded in who you are and because you no longer need the room to approve of you for you to belong in it. This isn't about arrogance or being closed off. It's about self-acceptance, integrity, and courage. It's about carrying your belonging with you, no matter where you are. And this kind of belonging allows you to enter spaces more honestly. You don't have to perform. You don't have to anticipate what others want from you. You just show up. That doesn't mean you stop being kind, thoughtful, or open to other people. It means you stop abandoning yourself to be liked. You bring your full, complex, honest self into every space and let others respond as they will. Some will accept you, some won't. But either way, you're no longer at the mercy of their reaction. You're anchored in your own identity. That's the spiritual part of it. Because to live that way takes faith, faith in your worth, your voice, your path. And it takes courage, the kind that makes you walk away when something feels off, even if it means walking alone. When you commit to this kind of belonging, you begin to live with more clarity and peace. You stop second-guessing your choices. You stop looking around for approval. You trust yourself. And that trust becomes a kind of freedom. Freedom from the performance, the fear, the pressure. It's not always easy, but it is always worth it. Because once you've tasted the strength that comes from standing in your own truth, no room, no opinion, and no rejection can take that away from you. You can negotiate a lot of things in life. You can compromise on a schedule, discuss timelines, adjust responsibilities, even debate ideas and perspectives. But one thing you cannot and should not ever negotiate is who you are. The moment you begin to bend or twist your identity just to be accepted, you're no longer standing in your truth. You're abandoning yourself. And while it may seem harmless at first, this kind of self-betrayal chips away at you over time. You start to feel the cost, even if you can't name it right away. It might look like burnout, resentment, anxiety, or a constant sense of disconnection. But underneath it all is that simple, painful reality. You've been negotiating who you are to keep the peace, to earn approval, or to avoid rejection. It starts small. Maybe you don't speak up in a meeting when something feels wrong because you don't want to be seen as difficult. Maybe you laugh at a joke you actually find offensive because you don't want to be excluded. Maybe you agree with a group's opinion even though something inside you is saying, "This isn't right for me." And each time, a part of you goes quiet. Each time, you shrink just a little more. And what you get in exchange isn't real acceptance. It's conditional acceptance. It's the kind of approval that only holds as long as you keep playing the part. But the truth is, playing the part is exhausting, and it creates a gap between who you are and how you show up in the world. Over time, that gap becomes a void. You stop recognizing yourself. You're performing for people who don't really know you, and who wouldn't accept you if they did. There's a kind of loneliness that comes with pretending to be someone else. Even if you're surrounded by people, even if you're included in every room, you feel alone. That's because you're not really there. Only the version of you that fits their expectations is present. The real you has been edited, trimmed down, silenced. And maybe you've convinced yourself that's the price you have to pay to be successful, to be liked, to survive in certain spaces. But at some point, you realize that surviving is not the same as living. And fitting in is not the same as belonging. When you decide to stop negotiating who you are, it's not just about taking a stand for yourself. It's about reclaiming your peace. It's about saying, "I will not betray myself for your comfort." That doesn't mean you stop listening or collaborating or growing. It means you stop abandoning your values, your voice, and your identity to make other people comfortable. You stop pretending to be okay with things that don't align with who you are. It's not about being rigid or arrogant. It's about being rooted in your values, rooted in your truth. This kind of clarity doesn't always come easy. For many of us, we spent years, maybe decades, learning how to be who we were supposed to be. We learned how to be agreeable, likable, successful, polished. We learned how to minimize our differences to avoid conflict. And unlearning that takes time. It takes courage to peel back those layers and remember who you were before the world told you to be someone else. But once you begin, something shifts. You start to feel whole again. You start to feel real. The people who are meant to be in your life, the spaces that are right for you, they won't require you to perform. They'll make room for your full self, not just the parts that are easy or agreeable. And yes, standing in your identity might mean losing some people. It might mean stepping out of rooms where you once felt comfortable. But what you gain is far more valuable. You gain integrity. You gain trust with yourself. You gain the ability to walk into any room and know that you didn't leave any part of yourself behind to be there. And that is power, not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind. The kind that comes from being at home in your own skin, no matter where you are or who you're with. Because when you stop negotiating who you are, you stop asking the world to give you permission to exist. You start giving that permission to yourself. Trust is something we talk about all the time, but we rarely stop to think about what it actually means. We say things like, "I just don't trust them," or "there are trust issues on this team." But when you really try to define trust, it becomes clear how complex it is. Trust is not just one feeling or a vague sense of connection. It's a series of behaviors and decisions we make every day. It's built in small moments and lost in small moments too. And what makes it even more complicated is that most people aren't taught how to recognize or talk about trust in specific terms. They know when it's missing, but they can't always explain why. The challenge with trust is that it's deeply tied to our sense of safety. When someone tells us, even indirectly, that we are not trustworthy or that they don't trust us, it hits a core part of who we are. It doesn't land as simple feedback. It feels like a threat. That's why we often react with defensiveness, withdrawal, or even anger when the topic comes up. Our brains move into protection mode. And in that state, we're no longer thinking clearly or constructively. We're reacting. That's why it's so important to understand that trust is not just about feelings. It's about specific actions and behaviors. It's not something vague we either have or don't have. It's something we can build step by step through the way we show up for each other. Through research and experience, one of the most effective ways to break trust down into something actionable is using a framework that outlines the 7 key elements that create and sustain trust. These elements are observable, which means we can identify them, talk about them, and hold ourselves and others accountable to them. They spell out the word ing, and each letter stands for a behavior that either strengthens or weakens trust in relationships. Boundaries are the first. Trust starts when people are clear about what's okay and not okay. It's about saying no when you need to and respecting when someone else says no. Without boundaries, resentment builds. Reliability comes next. That's doing what you say you'll do, consistently. It's not about being perfect. It's about being dependable. If someone says they'll get back to you and they do, you trust them a little more. If they break that promise repeatedly, trust erodes. Accountability is about owning your mistakes, apologizing, and making amends. It's also about holding others accountable in a direct and respectful way. It's not about blame or shame. It's about responsibility. Then comes the vault. This one is tricky. It's not just about keeping secrets. It's about not using information that doesn't belong to you as a way to build connection. If someone tells you something personal and you share it to feel included in another group, that's a violation. Even if it wasn't about them. That kind of sharing breaks trust instantly. Integrity is the heart of the whole model. It means choosing what's right over what's easy, fast, or convenient. It's living according to your values, not just talking about them. People trust you more when your actions and your words align. Then there's non-judgment. This means creating a space where people can ask for help or admit they're struggling without being shamed. It also means giving yourself that same compassion. We trust people who let us be human. And finally, there's generosity. This is about extending the most generous interpretation to other people's words and actions. It means that when something goes wrong, you don't jump straight to anger or blame. You pause, you assume the best, and you ask for clarity instead of making assumptions. This doesn't mean ignoring real issues. It means creating room for honest conversation before writing someone off. When these 7 behaviors are present, trust grows. When even one of them is consistently missing, trust begins to fall apart. And because trust is so foundational to every meaningful relationship, personal, professional, or otherwise, it's something worth paying attention to. Understanding trust as something concrete and behavioral allows us to work on it intentionally. It gives us the language we need to address issues without blame or judgment. It gives us a way forward, because when we can name what's broken, we can begin to repair it.